Hey guys, welcome to Ethernet Blueprint. Hey guys, welcome to the Ethernet Blueprint. My name's Tim Tritch, and on this channel we focus on helping people just like you build in a great network in your new construction home. And today's video is part 2 of our series, and we're going to focus on internet provider and actually planning this thing out as far as your equipment goes. We're going to add some costs and talk about all of that. Now, it is a cold day here in Nebraska, so I'm going to go inside to finish the recording, but we're going to be talking about how to get your service from outside your home to wherever you chose for your network head end right after this. Now, let me start out just by saying, I know that as you put this house together, there are a ton of details, tons of little things that you got to make decisions on, and it can be a bit overwhelming. So that is why I put together this video. Unfortunately, when people are going through these, they're basing it off of a lot what their builder says. Well, what kind of lights do you want? What kind of countertop do you want? What kind of this? What kind of that? Well, your builder doesn't give a squat about your network in most cases. So he's not even talking to you about those things. He's relying either on you to know or other vendors to step in and have those conversations. And so the network a lot of times gets forgotten. And if you really think about our lives right now, how often are we using Wi-Fi in our home? All the time, right? I mean, Xboxing, gaming, remote working, smart devices, you name it, right? We're using it all the time. So guys, I encourage you, watch this series, start with the first video, then come to this one. We're gonna piece this thing together and give you guys a good plan on how you can plan a great network in your home, so everything works the way you want it. All right, let's go ahead and get started and talk about the internet service provider. So when I'm doing this, when I'm talking with someone, one of the first things I want to know is, who is your internet service provider, or what are your options? Maybe you have more than one option. Are they all fiber? Are you going to be forced to use Starlink because maybe you live in a rural environment? Are you going to use Verizon 5G like I'm using at my house? All of those little scenarios paint a different picture on how to get the service from wherever you're going to put it to your network head end, which you chose from the first video. You have an idea where your equipment's going to sit. Now we have to figure out how to get the service connected to it, okay? In the Midwest, we have basements. So like, for example, Verizon 5G doesn't always work the best in basements. They want it sitting next to a window that needs to be a certain window on a certain side of the house to ensure you're getting the best signal, okay? So there may not be an option just to set it on my rack, which would be the easiest thing. You just set it there, plug it in, and away you go. That may not be an option. So we got to kind of plan these things and think through this a little bit, okay? And Starlink's another great example. If you're in a rural place and you need to use Starlink, you need to have a game plan for how to get that service connected to wherever your head end is at. So let's kind of just take a step back and think about this for a minute. You want to know who your internet service provider is. That's part 1, okay? So once you have that idea, then we can kind of move forward with the plan. So I'm going to walk through just a couple of those here, just so you guys have an idea of maybe what would go into it. So let's start with fiber, okay? So as you saw in the beginning of the video, I was standing outside. That is where Cox Fiber brings service to my house. They bring the fiber right there, and then the installer comes out and says, all right, where do you need this fiber to connect into? Now, in my house, my basement's unfinished, so it's really easy. There's exposed beams in here. They could easily extend the service to my network rack. However, that may not be the case for you. So in cases where you're gonna have fiber or some kind of physical media, maybe it's coax for cable or whatever, and you need to be able to connect that to a modem back by your rack, then I would recommend using flex tubing. Now, this is called ENT tubing, okay? And it comes in a couple different designs. Now, I refer to it as flex tubing a lot. Sometimes it's called Smurf tube because of its blue color, although there's an orange variation of it as well. But the actual tubing is called ENT tubing. This is by far the easiest and best way to ensure that any internet provider can bring fiber from outside to your network head end. And all it really entails is during the building process, before the drywall goes up and your insulation goes in, that someone runs some flex tubing, maybe 1.5 inch flex tubing from here, from your network head end, wherever that's at in your home, all the way and poke it outside your house where your demarc or where the internet is going to connect to your house. Now you should have a pretty good idea of that. A lot of times it's where the water and the power meter connects in, so you should have a pretty good idea. If you don't know, I encourage you to call your internet provider and have them maybe even come on site and do a little bit of an assessment and saying, okay, we're going to be on that pedestal over there, and this is where we would connect service to your house. That way you know where to run it. This is a very inexpensive thing to do. It does not cost a lot to run it, but there are a few tricks. You're going to want to make sure you don't put any sharp 90-degree bends in it, because when the internet provider installer comes, they're going to either run a fish tape through the tube and then pull their fiber back through. Sometimes they have to, they'll blow a string through. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but the sharper your bends are, the harder it is for them to do it. We've even had some ISPs saying, I can't do this. I can't get my fish tape through it, okay? You gotta remember, these guys don't do this all the time. They're mainly just drilling a hole in the wall and setting up their modem and going. They're not really prepared to do some of these things. So the easier you make it for them, the easier it will go. So guys, ENT tubing, Smurf tube, flex tube, whatever you wanna call it, is a really, really great way to ensure that they can get fiber from outside to wherever your network head end is. Now, I wanted to show you this too, guys. You can see this one is mounted outside of my drywall. So for a basement install, if this was back where my utility equipment was going to be or something like that, you know, where my heater and water heater and stuff was going to be, having it exposed like this is no big deal. However, you might want to hide this, right? So I'm going to show you an option 2 where we can actually put it in a drywall so you actually don't see this thing at all. You would just have to know it's there. In the example of my rack, I actually have the ENT flex tubing run down behind the drywall, and it actually pops out behind, it actually stops right behind this cable outlet, okay? So this is, we call them swoop plates, or sometimes they're called cable outlets, or, you know, some of those, they got a bunch of different names. But the tubing actually stops right in here, and then it allows me to run cabling down through, or fiber, or whatever I need to run down through. And it's nicely hidden in the wall. You know, picture this wall being finished, or, you know, maybe this is an office or something, and or there's wood here because there's a cabinet, but you just, it gives you the ability to actually hide it in the wall too. You don't have to leave it exposed if you don't want to. And I just wanted to call that out here. Now, in addition to fiber internet, maybe you're out in the country and you're using something like Starlink, okay? Using that flex tube, ENT tubing, will really help you get your Starlink service wherever you need to bring it in too. Because a lot of times that dish is going to be mounted on your roof or maybe on the side of your house, but typically that dish needs to point in all different directions, so it needs perfect visibility of the sky. Roof mounting is by far probably your easiest and best way to do that. It comes with a 75-foot cable, but they sell a 150-foot cable, I believe is the length of it. And it's proprietary cable. You can't just plug it into an Ethernet adapter and it goes into here. You have to use Starlink's cable for it. So using this ENT flex tubing allows you to be able to connect that outside internet wherever you're going to put your dish to your network head in, guys. And it's important to plan this thing from the start, because it is really hard to get that cabling where you need it later, especially with Starlink, which has a pretty good diameter on the cable. It's a big cable. It's rated for outdoors, it's shielded, and it's got that proprietary end on it that just makes it a little bit more difficult to navigate through drywall and whatnot. So if you guys are having Starlink, you're going to want to make sure that you also look at using something like flex tube, and make sure you get big enough flex tube. I would focus on maybe a little bit bigger stuff, 1.5 inches for sure, to be able to get that big thick cable from point A to point B. Now the next one I want to talk about is using something like a 5G service. Right here we have the Verizon 5G, which is what I use in my house. And as you can see, this is sitting in my laundry room, which is on the 2nd floor of my house. My network head end is in my basement. So when you have something like this where you don't know where it's going to need to sit, maybe it's got to sit in an upstairs bedroom, maybe it can sit in the office, maybe it needs to sit in the living room, you'll need to make sure you have a plan to be able to connect this device from the best location in your house back to your network head in. So the way we did that is, this is sitting in my living room, there's an Ethernet cable coming off the back, and it actually goes down here to a jack under my wife's desk right there. So as you can see, it is just plugged into a regular wall outlet that we have. Now this goes behind the jack is cabling that goes down to my network head-in is one of the ports on my patch panel. So instead of plugging this into the switch, it's actually plugged into the internet port or the WAN port on my router and giving my entire network rack its service. So if you're planning on using something like Verizon 5G, AT&T 5G, T-Mobile 5G, one of those, you guys, you might have to try out a couple different places in the room. So it's really, really good to be able to sprinkle some of those network connections, some of those Ethernet drops that we talked about in the last video in different locations in the house. You know, maybe you run them to your kids' bedrooms, but you're not planning on putting a computer or a TV in there. That's okay. You might need to put the internet router in there or, you know, something like that to be able to ensure you get the best and fastest service to your house possible. I have noticed these things can be a bit finicky on where they're at. Typically, when I'm deploying them, I try them out in a few different areas in the home. They want to be close to a window and they want to be, you know, near the side of the house, closest to wherever the tower they're connecting to ensure they get the fastest speeds. If the service has to go all the way through your house, it makes it go slower. It just doesn't work as well. And I find that you get some interruptions and things like that. So if you guys are going to use some kind of 5G service, make sure you sprinkle some jacks around your house to be able to plug into, to be able to connect that device back to your network head-in with all your other cable that's already being run to your house. All right, guys. So once you get things figured out on how you're going to do your ISP, how you're going to connect your ISP to your network, now we need to figure out what it's going to connect to. So I want to kind of walk you through Ubiquiti's website and kind of just show you around a little bit so you can kind of plan. Unfortunately, this video would be way too long if I went and took a deep dive on all these products. However, I want to give you the tools that you need to be able to kind of know your way around and know what's what so you can figure out what this thing is going to cost you for one, and two, what equipment you're going to need, okay? So now they have this build your own Unifi system. You're welcome to look at it. I find it's very limited. It doesn't offer you everything. It only offers some of their like professional grade stuff. And so after you're at step 2, you've already spent $1,000 if you went for their cheapest option. So I don't know that I would recommend it. You can play with it if you'd like to. All right, so the first thing you're going to need is a router. So Ubiquiti has a couple flavors of that. There's the cloud keys and gateways, and I'll just kind of explain them real quick. And then there is the UDM line, okay? So the Dream Machine line. So if you come over here to cloud keys and gateways, these right here, the Gateway Professional and the Gateway Lite are just routers. They do not have any controller built in, nothing. They are just a router firewall. That's all they're doing. They will need something like a cloud key or hosting or even a local computer on your home network in your house to be able to tell them what to do. You don't just log into this thing and configure it. You have to log into a controller like this Cloud Key Gen 2 Plus here and send the config down to the device. So if you buy one of these, you're going to need to buy either one of these, look at cloud hosting, and there's a lot of options. Ubiquiti has some. There is Hostify, which is a great option. I've used them in the past, and Unihost is kind of a new player in the space. I really like them, and that's who I use today. So, but you need some kind of controller, okay? Now, Ubiquiti will let you download the controller for free and install it on a computer. So if you have a dedicated computer that you want to be your controller, you can get one for free and then go ahead and purchase one of these great options. However, most cases, people don't want to be messing with that. Now you got a computer to make sure is always online and updated, and so it can be a little bit more of a pain. Most times I'll point people in the direction of using the UDM line, okay? And there's really just a couple that I would recommend, but there's a lot of flavors in here. They've done a good job of putting things as options for you based off of how big or small your network's going to be, okay? They don't want you to just have to buy some, crazy amount of equipment if you have light needs, okay? So first I'm going to focus on the Dream Machine Pro and Special Edition, okay? Now, these are tried and true. These are my go-tos, especially if you have a rack. They're really, really great options. They have a hard drive bay built into them, so they can be your camera recorder at the same time. So if you're planning on having cameras in your home, guys, I would recommend looking at one of these because any camera system that you buy is either going to record, it has to record somewhere. You're either going to pay for a cloud service or you're going to have to buy an NVR. This has the NVR sort of built in right in your router. You're already buying one. You just got to buy some storage. So really, really great option. When we do the configuration, I'm actually going to do it on a Dream Machine Pro when we set up our VLANs and everything. So you'll get to actually see what this looks like. But the big difference between these and the last ones I showed you is these have controllers built into them. You do not need a separate cloud key or a separate PC or cloud hosting to be able to set these up. You'll actually log into this device, access the controller from there, and then you can do all your configurations for your entire network in one place. Now, if you are looking at cameras, I would look at maybe doing the Dream Machine Special Edition. That's the big difference between these two. There's a couple other minor differences, but the difference in price tag is really you're paying for PoE ports. This one, the 6 ports right here, are PoE. There's 6 PoE ports, which are great for cameras, and then 2 PoE Plus ports, which is great for your Ubiquiti Wi-Fi 6 access points. This one doesn't have any PoE ports. It just has gigabit ports on it, okay? They're both capable of 10 gig, so they're very, very similar. But if you are looking to maybe do some Ubiquiti cameras, it might be better to go ahead and upgrade because then you can plug some cameras directly into this device, okay? If you have a smaller network, and by smaller, I mean maybe 2 access points or less, I would maybe look at the Dream Router or the Unifi Express. They are just like the Dream Machines, but they are a smaller form factor, simpler. There's less horsepower behind it. This Dream Router is actually really, really nice. It does a good job. It has a couple PoE ports on the back, so you can plug cameras into this as well. Plus, it has Wi-Fi 6 built into it. So this actually has an access point built right into the controller, which is really, really great. Has a 4-port switch on the back, really, really does a good job. And so you can see it's not rack mountable, but there are some routing option or mounting options. But this is really good if you just especially planning on doing a shelf or something like that, just to sit in there, okay? It's a good device. I powered my entire network off of one of these for like 3 or 4 months and did not have one single issue with it. It really did a great job. At the time of recording this is a brand new device. This is the Unifi Express, and it's not very expensive. It's probably going to be sold out for a while. It's also designed for very, very simple networks. The Unifi Dream Router is $199. This is $150. So it's a little cheaper, but it also has Wi-Fi 6 built into it and can connect up to 60 devices on it, has just a couple ports on the back, and is really, really great for a simple router that has a controller built into it. I think these things will sell very well for Ubiquiti because they fulfill a very specific need. So if your network is, doesn't need to be very big, you've downsized for your final home, for your build, maybe look at the Dream Router or this Express. Really, really powerful. They pack a lot of punch, okay? All right, so let's talk switching here for a second. So Ubiquiti has a lot of switch options. Let me just kind of summarize them a little bit for you. So there's 24 port, you'll see professional, and then you'll see standard, okay, 48 port. There's regular 24 port. There's another, so some of them have PoE, some of them don't. So they're giving you a lot of different range of a switch, okay? So the big difference between the 24 port professional and the standard series is this is going to have a lot more power. You're paying for the power. And you're also paying for 10 gigabit capability. So if you want a 10 gigabit network, you're going to have to use the professional grade switch. If you just want a standard gigabit network and you aren't powering as many devices, the standard 24 PoE works great. I use them all the time. They are a fantastic switch, okay? Now, when you're picking your switch, you're really looking at a couple things. How many cables do I need to plug in? And how much power do I need? Am I doing 5 access points at 10 watts a piece, or am I doing 2 access points at 10 watts a piece, right? So you got to do a little math and find out how much power you're going to need, and then also how many ports you're going to need as well. So those are the 2 big factors. And then when you add that to, do I need 10 gigabit speeds versus standard 1 gigabit speeds, okay? That's really going to be the big difference. For simpler, smaller networks, they do have some light options down here. There's an 8-port light, 16-port light, and then this is the standard 16-port PoE, more of the rack mount option. These are great little switches, guys. We use these all the time for simple networks that only have 1 or 2 access points in them. There's 8 PoE plus ports, 8 standard gigabit ports, 45 watts of power. They're great little devices. They do a really, really good job. There's a wall mounting option, or you can just set it on a shelf. They're good looking devices, so if someone has to see it, it's not that big a deal. But they're great little switches, and I highly recommend them. I really, really do like them. I've used them in a lot of deployments. Okay. And lastly, I want to talk about is Wi-Fi. So Ubiquiti also has a lot of options for Wi-Fi. Now, one thing I will point out at the time of recording this video, which is December 2nd, 2023, I would focus on the U6 versions or the U6 Enterprise versions, okay? I don't know that I would do any AC. Not that these APs are bad, but this is Wi-Fi 5. Wi-Fi 5 is kind of working its way out. Wi-Fi 6 is pretty much the new standard nowadays. As you know, there's at this time of recording this, there's a lot of Wi-Fi 7 gimmicky stuff coming out, even though our devices can't really support it that well. So if I'm buying Ubiquiti, typically I'm recommending the U6 or Wi-Fi 6 equipment. Okay, so there's the U6 Professional and the long range. These two for ceiling mounted access points. I mean, I love them. They're tried and true. They do a great job. There's a couple slight differences between them. The Wi-Fi 6 Professional is going to use a little bit less power. This one requires a little bit more power because of the heavier dutier antennas. The long range basically means the antennas have a little bit more horsepower. But this one actually might be even a little bit faster because it has 4x4 MIMO on both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. You can't go wrong with either one of them, guys. They are great access points. The U6 in-wall is really great for those offices, because if you look at their in-wall series, there is a 4-port switch on the bottom of it. So it'll actually mount on a wall like this. As you can see it kind of going on the wall here. And then there's 4 ports of switching on the bottom, which allows you to continue to hardline. I actually use them behind TVs, even though I get ridiculed for that. A lot of people say, you're just killing the signal. It depends on the space. I don't go to that, but it's a really nice way to run one cable behind a TV and then still be able to hardline your TV. And then your Wi-Fi is kind of hidden behind the TV too. So, the space really determines that. If it's got a power, if it's doing your whole house, I wouldn't do that. But if it's just doing a room, it'll do it really, really good. So the in-walls are also another really, really great option for you. And then for outdoor, you can see there's a couple different things you can click on. Again, AC, I wouldn't recommend either one of those. I really like this U6 mesh for an outdoor access point. It is waterproof. As long as you mount it upright like this, it can be outdoors. It's good looking. You can see it mounted on the wall, and just basically just needs a cable, click it in, and is going to provide nice Wi-Fi 6 coverage for a back patio or a pool area, and do a really, really nice job. So from a Wi-Fi standpoint, I really focus on those access points. I think you're going to get the best bang for your buck. So what I'd recommend doing now is kind of start plugging this stuff up. So let's just add to shopping cart here, right? So we're going to go ahead. We're going to put the Dream Machine Pro in there. That's our go-to. It really does a great job. So we're up there. I'm going to go into switching. Let's say you need a little bit more port capability, but you don't need nothing crazy. So we're going to do a standard 48 port switch. So we'll go ahead and grab that and add to cart. And then let's say we're going to go ahead and do 3 or 4, let's say 4 access points, 3 in the house, 1 outdoors. So we're going to do 3 of these. Add another one and another one. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and do the U6 mesh for our outdoor. Okay. So now we have a controller and we have a router. We have a switch that will allow us to connect up to 48 ports in our house, which is more than enough. And we have Wi-Fi. Right there, you're sitting at about $1,624 before shipping and tax. Okay. So like I said, is this as cheap as going to Best Buy and picking up the latest, greatest garbage they're selling that you're probably going to have to replace in a couple of years? Yes, it's more expensive, but I would argue this is prosumer equipment is going to give you a lot of value for what you're doing, and it's going to look nice. It's completely upgradable. So if down the road they come up with a Wi-Fi 7 version of their access points and you want to go to it, you just simply take down your access points, plug in the Wi-Fi 7 version, and away you go. It really is very versatile. It'll be the last network you ever need to install in your house. And again, $1,600 is not too bad. I see Orbi Wi-Fi 7 garbage mesh systems for like $2,000. I mean, it's crazy what they're selling these things for. And I just argue that that consumer stuff just isn't going to last as well as this. I have liked the longevity of Ubiquiti's equipment. It's one of the things I think they've done a pretty good job of. So I had an AC Pro in that was my very first access points that I bought. I used them for like 9 years before upgrading to Wi-Fi 6. And they were still working. I just chose to upgrade. They were working just fine. I just wanted to get Wi-Fi 6 in my house. So I put them to the side and I bought new access points and plugged it in. I think Ubiquiti does a pretty good job. Nobody's perfect and they get a bad rap on a lot of things, but I think it's pretty good. The last thing, I know we're getting on 13 minutes here, so the last thing I want to talk about real quick is cameras. In case you are looking at it, this video isn't about cameras, but Ubiquiti does have some really nice options for cameras. They have just some portable ones that kind of go in the house, the Instant, which is a Wi-Fi one. They have some professional grade cameras. Again, it's going to be more of a 4K model versus a 2K model. But I'd look at like the G5 Bullet or the G5 Professional. Those are going to be really good cameras. The G4 Professionals are really good either one of these are really good cameras. I would avoid the Dome. I just had a lot of problems with mine with glare and all this. It's got a little plastic thing that protects the lens in here, and it just gets all sorts of glare and dust in there. I was not happy with it at all. Obviously, they have some pretty beefy, crazy AI built cameras. They have doorbells. So if you guys want a smart doorbell, you can actually build one right into your Ubiquiti network and have it record right to the Dream Machine Pro. They have a lot of good camera options, really cool stuff. They have a Theta doorbell option. So this is your doorbell chime that's PoE powered. Pretty cool stuff, guys. Some floodlights, just all sorts of great options that literally just plug right in, get adopted, and away you go. It's really cool. And when I do the setup, I'll try to remember to adopt a camera too, so you guys can see that a little bit. But one of the nice things about using one of their gateways like this is the ability to put that hard drive in. You can put an 8 terabyte hard drive in, and now you have a recorder built right in your router, and you can add some cameras. The one thing I will point out is you're probably, with these guys, limited to about 4 or 5 cameras. They're really not going to have the horsepower to do your network and your camera recording if you have a lot of cameras at your house. If you do have a lot of cameras, Ubiquiti does have some recorder options, and I'd recommend looking at one of these. So this one's $300. You can put multiple hard drives in there, do RAID, all sorts of stuff in there, and it actually has the controller software built into it. So it becomes your NVR, and it's a little separate from the gateway, but it's going to allow this device here to accommodate your entire camera system versus, having your router do everything. So just understand that if you do choose to use one of the gateways here, you're probably limited on using 4 or 5 cameras, maybe 6, before things might start running slower depending on the equipment you buy. So Ubiquiti's got a lot of nice tools in here. They'll kind of tell you, help you pick your storage and some things like that based on how far you want to go, how far back you want to go, how often you're recording, all that other stuff. So again, just kind of allows you to do a really good job of planning. Their website's really nice, and hopefully this will give you some pretty good insight as to how to navigate it so you can put your network together. If you guys have questions, please leave them in the comments. I will do my very best to get them answered. It's really hard to cover everything in a video series like this, so I know there's going to be some questions out there. So just by all means, drop them in the comments. I try to do a pretty good job of answering everybody who writes me for the most part. It's one of the perks of being smaller, I guess. But hopefully it helps you. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off there. We are going to continue the series. So if these videos have been helpful to you, guys, we're going to set this thing up from start to finish. The beginning parts is the planning and how to get things in the right place. The second half of the series is going to be configuring. We're going to set up a network from start to finish, program it. We're going to do VLANs. We're going to do all sorts of things to allow you to get your network set up the way you want it. So I encourage you to like, subscribe, follow us for more so you don't miss a video. Turn on the little bell so you get alerted when new videos come out, and we will continue down the road. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in a later video.